Hey, it's Mr. Bill from Mr. Bill Media here, and I'm going to show you some media from my media playlist and media, like Julian Gray styles.
Hey everybody, Garden Sound here. You might notice a couple of things. One, Lila is not here, or has turned into Mr. Bill. Can't really decide which. Also, I'm not in my studio. I'm in Bill's studio, and also this is Mr. Bill. Everybody say hi.
Did they say hi?
They said hi.
Hey.
Today, I thought I'd... Let me do that again without cracking my voice like I'm fucking 14. Hi everybody, Garden Sound here. Oh, my balls dropped yesterday. Normally on How to Make, what I do is I take a track by another artist, I put it into Ableton, and I try to dissect it and rebuild it as closely as possible to the original. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Today, we're going to be having Mr. Bill dissect his own project file and showing us exactly what it takes to make something sound like him. So what are we working on today? What song are we working on?
It's called Screening. It's a track that I wrote with Funny. He sent me stems a long ass time ago, and then I didn't really work on it for a long time.
Is this the same Funny that does all your artwork?
Yeah, same guy.
Okay.
And then I went over to London, and we basically worked on it together and finished it. And then this is the project file right now that is available on my website for people if they want to check it out.
Right. So the file we're looking at here is going to be available on live.mrbillstunes.com. Link in the description below.
Yeah. And there's a stack more available here too. So basically, my goal eventually is to get my entire discography on here, just totally open source, so anyone can do anything with any of my music. Because I just I don't know, I feel like once I've written it, it's sort of, that's it, it's done anyway. So I decided I would go through this project file because it's like a pretty hefty project, it's pretty big, and it's a pretty good demonstration of a project file that you would get from my website. And plus, it's just a nice chill tune and feels like a chill vibe day. So I feel like
Can we listen to a little bit?
Just wait, it'll drop. There'll be a drop. Just hold it.
Wait,
I'm telling you, just wait.
wait just a second, you son of a bitch.
Wait there a second, you son of a bitch. It's getting there.
It's good, man.
It's like I can navigate people like through the listening experience. It's gonna do it in a second. Alright, ready? Like almost on like this next bit. Yeah, this bit. So basically, the idea of this tune is this whole drop is supposed to be like a happy sort of lullaby, like daytime vibe, and then there's this sort of breakdown which goes from daytime to nighttime, and then there's like a whole nighttime vibe. So if we did like a film clip to it, that would kind of be the vibe of the thing. And you can kind of see with this last chord, it sort of resolves all dark and quirky like. You can hear the crickets come out and stuff. This guitar. Oh yeah, I actually recorded real guitar for this tune.
Who did the guitar? Do you know?
Me.
You did?
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
It's clean though.
Yeah, it sounds kind of nice. It fits in the song well. There's also some in the intro here too.
So that's actually something I want to start us talking about here, because a lot of the adjectives that I would use to describe your music all kind of boil down to just a couple core adjectives. First one of those is clean. So you're kind of known for having a clean sound.
Right.
How do you achieve such a clean sound?
I mean, I guess I start with the drums and then I sort of work from there, layering things on top of it. So I feel like as long as your drums have a lot of space and they're not all super compressed together and stuff, like for instance, these drums are really clean and they have tons of space. They don't really take up much of the spectrum and they're not getting massively fed into the limiter. Like there's a little bit of gain reduction. Well, actually that one, the transient of that snare gets massively reduced, but it's such a sort of clicky sound anyway that you don't necessarily need the transient. It's more or less just this wooden pop. But I would say I usually start there and make sure that all this stuff sounds good. And then from there just start layering stuff on top. So the next thing would be sub, and then I'm always making sure that the sub and the kick aren't interacting in shitty ways. So making sure that there's nice side chaining happening. And actually I think the side chain, it doesn't even look like there is any sidechain happening here. Yeah, there's like
There's
very
a slight
minimal,
bit of gain reduction, yeah.
tiny bit, yeah.
So this is something that I picked up last time we hung out. I wasn't doing this before. Using these click sounds to sidechain instead of sidechaining from an actual like drum channel.
Yeah, so the theory behind that is that if you're just feeding a small, so the way sidechaining works is the compressor reacts, or in most, well, 99% of cases, will basically be turning something down based on the input of another signal. And there's a release time on the compressor. And what the release time does is it tells the signal after it's been turned down to get turned back up again after a certain amount of time. So in this case, it's telling it to get turned up 111 milliseconds later. But that release time doesn't come into effect until the signal that you're sending into it has stopped being sent into it. So for instance, if I just sent full-blown white noise into this thing for like a minute straight, it would not release until a minute and 111 milliseconds after that, you know? So kind of like it that's like a simple example, I guess, of a way to think about it. So what I try to do is I try to make the click sample as non-existent as possible, but still existent enough to just like trigger the thing. And then the release and the attack time become fully capable of doing the exact time that I want them to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's more musical.
Well, yeah, it's easier to get like a 16th note out of it or whatever for sure, because like you can just highlight however much you want on the grid, and then you can just look down at this place on the transport, and you can see, okay, that's 351 milliseconds. If I wanted to come back here, that's 263 milliseconds. That there is 175. That there is 88 or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So you can just quickly like figure out exactly how much release time you need, and I find that can be pretty good for creating like a pretty musical sidechain effect. For some reason I have 3 click inputs here. I don't know why, but I don't know, sometimes I just get really messy with my producing, and then when I go to clean shit up at the end, I just, I don't know, do whatever, and it turns out the way it does. I subject all of my project files to this standardization process. I don't know if you've seen this. It's basically a process that I've created a color name for every, well actually Funny created a color name for every color in the Ableton manual, and then these are exactly what would color all, or what I color all of the groups. And then there's just some miscellaneous processes that I subject the project file to, and then, you know, these are basically what all the project files end up looking like. They're all kind of look the same, and then I make sure I freeze and flatten everything and whatnot. So this actually is not what my project file looks like when I write it. This is what it looks like after I subject it to that standardization process. So I probably just had 3 sidechain things going in the track whilst I was writing it, and then when I went to clean it up later, I was like, oh fuck, and then just like kind of tried to organize it as best as I could. But I usually just put all the sidechain shit up the top anyway for the sake of the website stuff, just so it's kind of up there and out of the way.
Right.
Yeah, so after that, it looks like I probably would have done the pianos next. And as long as it looks like they're getting sidechain a little bit too, but not even that much.
Can you talk a bit about freezing and flattening and the process you go through with that? Because actually I get criticized a lot for doing that.
You get criticized for freezing and flattening?
Yeah, it's destructive and it doesn't preserve all the MIDI and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, the reason I do it in this project is because it uses third-party plugins on all of these channels. The idea behind my project files is that somebody who doesn't own Ableton could just go download a demo of Ableton, and then they could download a project file of mine and then open it up with no worries, because all the third party stuff is all flattened.
Right.
Sorry, not flattened. It's just frozen. So if you had Pro Q2, you could unfreeze this track and use this track as normal. Except I've EQ'd it with Pro Q2. It looks like a pretty simple EQ. So if you didn't have it, it wouldn't really be a huge deal anyway. But yeah, that's the reason why I freeze stuff. Usually, if I freeze and flatten stuff in a tune writing process, it is for like resampling purposes, and it is destructive, but I don't think that you should be criticized for it. I think like if you're willing to move forward with sounds in the process, then that's your choice. And if somebody has like an issue with doing that and they have to hang on to the MIDI until the very last like render, then that's like some commitment thing on their part that they're willing to go through for their music. But I think that's what makes everyone's music so different. Like, you know, Frequent wouldn't sound like Frequent, for instance, if he didn't have such a destructive process. And I don't think...
Hold on.
Yeah, like I don't think I would sound the way that I did if I didn't have such a destructive process either. Yeah, destroying audio can be a good thing sometimes. It's not inherently a bad thing. What is inherently a bad thing is music that sounds bad.
Boom.
Mic drop.
Ah, shit, that's the only mic we had.
This music isn't very complicated. This track, really, like, there's not much insane sound design happening or anything. So all of this stuff. This just came from the Okos, this like little synth that I have here, because this was the only synth that I took with me to London, and it's like a really nice little desktop semi-modular thing. So that's what that was from, and it's just a simple patch, like just a saw wave type thing. And some basic EQ and stuff. This sad synth I think was just a Contact thing. The Rhodes and the emotive melodies, I believe, probably also Contact, but it doesn't look like I used them in the end anyway.
But I mean, this is another thing that characterizes your music and sets it apart, is how many subtle layers there are for each individual like voice.
Right, yeah, totally. Yeah, if you take all of these layers, there's all these guitars, and then there's this like looped ambience stuff over the top. And then there's on top of that more pianos.
How many tracks is that right there?
Just for this one voice, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, plus 2 more, so 10. Yeah, I think maybe one of the things that makes my mixes clean a little bit, and you can easily fuck this up and make your mix unclean by doing this, is that every time I need something else in the sound, rather than trying to push it out with an EQ or a compressor, which I also do sometimes, what I've been trying to practice for like the last yeah, what I do sometimes is I'll push stuff out with the EQ or compressor. Like if something's not bright enough, you know, like it's easy to just put a EQ on and brighten it up that way. But a lot of the time what I'll try and do is actually create a new layer that just has that content in it. So for instance,
tell me what you're talking about.
Okay, so let's say that I feel like this whole thing isn't bright enough, right? So it sounds like this. Then I might add something like this. Like it's got some extra frequencies in it, but I'm not using an EQ to push those out. And then like this, well, let's see what else is layered over here. This saw thing. Like it's just an extra layer that has more frequency in the high register. And these sine chords too. And then the bells too.
I was just about to say bells. You do that a lot.
Yeah, totally. So usually they're there. Well, they sound nice, but they're also there for like a pretty functional purpose, to try and like fill out that high frequency stuff. So if we go back, yeah, you can hear now that bell coming through to fill out that high frequency. But without that, it sounds a bit dull. So yeah, it's just a mixture of like tons of shit, and then also all the drums are like the hi-hats are kind of filling out that high end a little bit. So I just try to make sure that there's enough elements in all the areas to fill out the spectrum nicely. And if there's not, then I don't try to force it out with tools. I try to get more layers in there to to fill it out. But a lot of people think that that results in like weak sounding music or whatever, I guess, because they're like, oh, you have to put like so much layers in to make it cool. You know, a real good song only needs 4 or 5 layers and then it's fine. It's like, yeah, kind of, but really in the end, you could boil all of this down to 4 or 5 ideas that are happening at any time. It's just that they're made up of many, many voices.
One of the things I picked up from one of your tutorials on your channel was the way you shape audio using the fades in Ableton. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so yeah, I definitely use the fades a lot to add dynamics to sounds and to clean sounds up a lot as well. So sometimes, like for instance, what I would have done here with this sound is it originally looks like this, and this sounds pretty glitchy and cool, but with the fades, you can hear it's just a little bit glitchier. And I try to do that not so much these days. I kind of like leaving all the little artifacts in between stuff more these days than I used to. But I used to be super anal about this stuff, and you get there's a few, like, this is probably a good example. Is originally this sound sounded like this, and now it sounds like this. It's been all like pitched up and down and, you know, cut really finely. And it's more or less just for articulating the envelope of a sound, really. So if you feel like you're like, oh, that's a bit too long and this is maybe a bit too long, then it's kind of nice or easy to just cut them and be like, well, let's just shorten this one and shorten this one, so it sounds like that instead of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's more or less just a way to articulate groove and stuff. Like if something goes dun versus do, it's kind of, you know, it gives them 2 completely different feels. One is heavier and one is more like technical sounding.
All right, so you said it's 2 completely different articulations.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like playing basically like with an instrument. But like the difference between playing open strings on a guitar versus palm muting or something, you know?
Right.
So I kind of treat these little fades as almost like palm mutes, and then the ones without fades as not palm mutes. So it'd be like da-da-da, da-da-da, you know, kind of like a guitar thing.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I came from being a guitarist, so I think that's why I started doing this sort of stuff, because that's why I do this da-da-da shit a lot. But yeah, if you listen to it in the track, it kind of almost sounds like it gives it more human articulation in a way, even though you're like doing more programming, really. And then there's all sorts of other articulation going on here, like auto pan stuff, just to chop the samples up and whatnot.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, you're not doing it as much as you used to. The trade-off between the 2 is nice.
Yeah.
So it's not constantly, you know, bleep bloopy glitchy. There are some parts of that you just kind of left in there, like, oh, that's fine with how it is.
Yeah, like this bit.
Nice.
Yeah, this kick sample is pretty cool. So the way I did that, I believe, this is kind of an interesting thing as well. The way that I generate these rhythms sometimes is, I believe I would have taken it from this rhythm here, and then, and then I just hit Control I to create these sort of pseudo transients in the clip. You can just create them really wherever you want, but usually I try to follow this in because it's like trying to be a layer with this thing, right? So you want to basically put sounds every time one of these happens just to create like a nice little layer on top of that. So then what you can do is hit right click, slice to new MIDI track, and then you do it based on the transients, and then that will just create you a MIDI clip based on those transients, like this. But then I'll just move them all down to a single slice, like so. So yeah, you know, then I'll just get these and then apply some sample to that. So it kind of follows the audio of this. And then it's just a matter of cleaning it up a little bit. And that's a nice way I find sometimes to layer like other samples over the top to keep both of the rhythmic articulations the same. And that's another thing, an example of where I wouldn't like, if I felt like this wasn't articulated properly,
rather than EQing it, you add another layer.
Yeah, add another layer that has
Nice.
the transients in it that I would want instead of this. Just helps kind of like make everything sound that extra bit bigger and
It's cool.
better.
Now another question for you. A lot of people might be looking at this, myself included, when I looked at some of your project files originally. It looks like this is a fuckload of work, dude. Like, how long does it take you to complete a project like this?
Well, this one happened over a long time, so all up, I would say I invested maybe 40 to 50 hours of work into this, but it was over the span of like a year or two, so it didn't feel like a lot, you know, because I would work on it like for half a day one day, and then the other half of the day I'd work on some other shit, and then I'd come back to it 6 months later and work on it for half a day again, you know. And then I just did that a bunch of times, and then when I went to London with Funny, we worked on it for like 2 days or something, and then I was done. So it didn't really feel like a lot of work. It felt like it came together pretty easily, but it just definitely happened over a long period of time. But if I were to sit down and try and make a track like this, yeah, it would definitely take me a few days of sort of waking up and working on it every day. And then, I mean, it's not really that much stuff. It's like 100 channels or something. But most of those are like layers, you know, to just embellish the main ideas. And it's not like the chord progression is super intense or anything like that. But yeah, this thing here, Funny actually was like, oh, I want you to make the Neo sound from the Matrix, you know.
I was gonna say that's what it sounds like. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about when he first gets sucked into the Matrix and he turns into liquid, right?
Exactly. Which is cool because I've never used that sound in a track before, and I've never used it since, and I never thought to ever use that sound in a track. So I was kind of like cool to have Funny there to be like, yeah, you should do that, and then like figure out how to do it. I kind of want to do a tutorial on that. I mean, I guess this is kind of now the tutorial on how to do that.
No, you should do one standalone.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing a standalone one on how to make the Matrix Neo voice sound.
Well, Bill, thanks for having us here in the studio. We can catch you on tour, right? You're about to go on a little something.
Yeah. Let's see. Depending on when this video comes out, if you look at the homepage of my website, most of the dates are usually just there. Or you can click this little tour thing, and obviously the dates will be there too. So yeah, depending on when this video comes out, I have a show at, well, it's not going to come out by tomorrow, but I have a show tomorrow at Beta, and then on Saturday at the Aggie. Then we're playing in Atlanta together on the 26th of April, which will be cool. Kelowna on the 17th of March. Anyway, people can go look at this. I have my Electricato tour dates are here as well, and we're actually going to add some more soon, because since putting all this shit here, I've actually announced some more shows, or gotten added to some more shows, including a festival in Chicago and some Mousetrap thing in Miami and some other stuff. So
Right on.
yeah, definitely always got shows happening. Check the tour page if you want to make sure that I'm not coming near you.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. Guys, if you'd like to see more content at the end card, don't worry. We've got a subscription link to Mr. Bill's channel, as well as more content from me. As always, my name is GARDNSOUND. This is Mr. Bill. Thanks again for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see y'all next time.